King Robert Baratheon may be the real reason several members of House Stark died in Game of Thrones, according to an intriguing theory. Multiple Starks died in Game of Thrones, and it may all have been the fault of a curse from King Robert Baratheon. The Starks were not only the main house in Game of Thrones, but also its most tragic. From the death of Ned in Season 1 onward, few families suffered greater misfortune and loss across the show's entire run. That was counterbalanced by the surviving Starks largely emerging victorious in the end, including Bran as a king and Sansa as a queen, but it could perhaps have been even better if not for King Robert Baratheon. Hey guys, welcome to my channel. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and also click on the notification bell to remain updated. Indeed, it's true that, theories aside, Bobby B is at least partially to blame for the fates of the Starks in Game of Thrones. After all, his insistence that Ned be his hand is what resulted in the Starks going south, separating, and suffering so much. But a key detail in Game of Thrones Season 1, Episode 1, Winter is Coming, puts even greater influence upon the king and suggests he's more to blame than anyone realized. Every Stark Robert Baratheon touched in Game of Thrones pilot died. The Robert Baratheon curse theory comes from his first meeting with the Starks in the Game of Thrones pilot. It features a key scene in which all the members of House Stark line up to greet the king's arrival at Winterfell, and secretly foreshadows multiple deaths. The first person Robert greets is his old friend Ned, embracing him in a big hug. Ned would, of course, end up being killed before Game of Thrones Season 1 was over, executed by Ser Ilyn Payne on the orders of Joffrey Baratheon. After Ned, Robert embraces Catelyn, then he ruffles Rickon's hair before shaking hands with Robb. Like Ned, all three of those characters would be killed later in Game of Thrones run. Catelyn and Robb die at the Red Wedding, and Rickon at the beginning of the Battle of the Bastards. Notably, they're the only Starks that Robert directly touches, and all of them end up dead. Arya, Bran, and Sansa are left untouched, and each one of them survives. Although they didn't end up dying, Robert Baratheon does interact with Bran, Arya, and Sansa Stark in ways that connect to their fates too. When he speaks to Bran, he asks him to show off his muscles and tells him that he'll be a soldier. It's not quite as direct as the touch of death, but Bran is pushed from a tower later in the episode, forever losing the use of his legs in what, when viewed through the lens of the theory, could be another impact of Robert's curse. Likewise, he asks Arya, "What's your name?" That may be innocuous enough, but it is far more interesting with the full view of Arya's journey in Game of Thrones. Her arc takes her to the faceless men of Braavos, where she leaves her identity behind and becomes no one. When asked her name then, the answer is, "A girl has no name." That makes her being the only Stark asked her name by King Robert a curious addition to the cursed Starks theory, and a detail that does match up very nicely with the overall idea. The theory isn't quite as convincing when it comes to Sansa, but it does still potentially work. Robert's only interaction is a passing comment, saying, "You're a pretty one." Much of Sansa's early story was twisting the idea of dreams of being the pretty wife of a handsome prince, showing the dark reality of that, which Robert may have cursed her to. Although it's a fun theory and does fit in a lot of ways, it's unlikely Game of Thrones planned for Robert Baratheon's interactions to kill the Starks. This was, after all, Game of Thrones Season 1, Episode 1, and while the show did have plenty of moments of foreshadowing, it would be difficult to predict so much so early on. It did have the benefit of the novels. At the time Game of Thrones started, George had written 4 A Song of Ice and Fire books, with the 5th, A Dance with Dragons, released a few months later, which means the deaths of Ned, Catelyn, and Robb were already confirmed. What would happen to Rickon, however, was not known at this point. Indeed, it will be up to the Winds of Winter to reveal Rickon's fate in the books, and there's no real way his death would have been known at that point, even if it was perhaps possible to guess given how the Starks' lives were going. Even if it wasn't intended, though, the detail is great to look back on and highlights just how much changed for the Starks from Game of Thrones' first episode. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like this video and drop comments. And most importantly, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss anything.